Guys, we made it. We're finally here, back in the Philippines after a year locked away in Australia. It feels good to be back, and we are straight back at work. As you can see, we've been hard at work at creating lots of content and new exciting shows which will be rolling out in the next few months. We have some huge announcements in terms of the changes that we're gonna be making on YouTube, but right now I'm just happy to be back. I'm happy to have Filipino ingredients to work with, and to celebrate, I'm gonna be making one of my favorite noodle recipes, because apparently noodles give you long life and we all need that during this pandemic. So today we're gonna be making some Pancit Palabok. So palabok is one of those pancit styles that is hit or miss in my book. You can either have some really good ones, or you can have sometimes that are, I don't know, sometimes they're served cold and have too much toppings and things like that. So it really depends on your preference and how you like to make it. So today I'm going to show you not a very traditional version, but just the way I like to make palabok at home. And it's really focusing on how all the ingredients come together. It's a dish that I don't often make because it has so many different steps to it. As you can see on my left side, it's a lot of ingredients. I like simple cooking usually when I'm at home, but that's why it's such a celebratory kind of festive dish, that when you bring it out in like a bilao or something, when there's a party, or you put it out on a big plate, it just looks beautiful and colorful. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work on our pork. So very simple. We're gonna take out some pork belly, and all you wanna do here is basically just make about 1/2 inch little liempo cuts. So I really do recommend you making this a day before in terms of the marinade, because you really want to flavor that pork. If you don't have the time, it's fine. You can come up with like a glaze and just baste it while it's in the oven. But this really just adds that extra layer of flavor. So we have some fish sauce, some brown sugar, some soy sauce, some lemongrass stalks. You can add some garlic, some onion, some Sprite. It's really up to you. I just like to keep it nice and simple. Our pork goes in, make sure it's coated, and this goes into the fridge overnight. Really just grab all that flavor. Really important, an hour before cooking it, take it out and just lay it out on a plate and leave that in the fridge just to dry up the skin a little bit more. So the next day you have marinated pork belly, which has been dried out slightly. We want to try to get the skin a little crispy. Obviously we're not deep frying this, we're just going to be oven cooking it, so it won't get like super crazy crispy, but it'll be good enough. Get a sheet pan out, line it with a little bit of oil, and then these pork slices go in at around 180 centigrade, or close to, what's that, 320, 350 Fahrenheit for about 30 to 40 minutes. After 30 to 40 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and go all the way up to 250 centigrade or 500 Fahrenheit to get it nice and crispy. Next thing we want is a beautiful stock, which is gonna be playing a huge part in our sauce. If you've seen palabok, most of the time it's noodles, so rice noodles, topped with this really rich kind of orange colored sauce, and that stock basically brings all the flavor for that. So what we want to do is have some chicken stock. So you can have chicken stock going like I do already. You can make your own chicken stock if you want by adding some chicken and some chicken bones, but I like to add a couple more aromatics before we actually use it. So I have some ginger, really rough slices here. With that, white onion, again, goes inside. A couple cloves of garlic, and then some white stalks from our scallions, which we're going to use later to basically top everything up. If you want, you can also use some leeks. Use whatever you have available. So that's going to simmer anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much flavor you want to bring to the overall dish. This is when we start getting into everyone might piss people off category. Usually what we do is you boil the shrimps in the stock. We're still gonna do that, but one little caveat and change that I'm gonna do is, instead of using the shrimp heads and boiling those, I feel like I don't get enough flavor when I'm boiling shrimp heads in stock. I feel like I get more flavor from shrimp heads, but I can't talk anymore, I get more flavor from shrimp heads when I actually cook it down with some oil. So we're gonna make a really like good garlic shrimp head oil with some annatto. So that's gonna be kind of like a reddish color, but it's gonna bring so much flavor to the overall sauce. So get some oil out nice and hot. We're gonna grab our shrimp and then we're just take off the heads and then put that straight into the pan. Our shrimp are already starting to get a really cool color. We're gonna chop up some garlic. It doesn't have to be too fine of a mince because the garlic's gonna be thrown away anyways. Already the smell that's coming out of here smells really good. Annatto tends to get quite bitter the longer you cook it. So what we want with the annatto is really not using it for flavor, but really just using it for color. So we're gonna add it right at the last minute. Cook it down on fire, maybe for like 2-3 minutes, and then just let it steep when the fire is off. 1 tablespoon of annatto has been in there for about 2-3 minutes, and you'll see how that color is just really beautiful and orange, and those shrimp heads are nice and fried off. So basically add everything into a mortar and pestle if you have it, or something where you can kind of bash those shrimp heads just to quickly release more flavor from them. Next, we're just gonna strain all of this. Press it down further just to grab those extra bits. Talking about our shrimp, our stock should be nice and flavorful at this point. So we're just gonna go ahead and cook them in here for about 2 to 3 minutes until they're just rightly done, but not completely overcooked, obviously. We want something still nice and plump and supple. And again, cooking the shrimp here will just enhance the flavor of the broth. So you go straight from the broth into some ice just to really stop the cooking so it doesn't overcook. And then this gets peeled and then added on top of the overall dish when it's done. Our pork, that first part of the pork should be done, so we'll take it out. So you'll see this is kind of like the cooking phase of the pork, right? And everything should be completely cooked through. You've got some caramelization happening. We're gonna go ahead and flip it, and then this goes back into the oven now, but this time at around 500 Fahrenheit or 250 centigrades. And this is really just to try to get some crispiness happening on the skin. You see some of it there. It's not gonna be extremely crispy, as I said in the beginning, because we're not deep frying it. You could deep fry it after this if you really want to, but putting it at the oven at that high temperature should help. Our broth at this point also is good to go, so all we need to do is strain it. I just chopped up some garlic and some onions, so we're gonna get a nice wide pan out or stock pot out. We're gonna add our shrimp and annatto oil to that pan, and then we're just gonna gently cook our garlic and our onions for about 2 to 3 minutes. This is really when we actually start building the flavors that are gonna make the bulk of the sauce. There's hardly anything more beautiful than just roasting pork and those bubbles of oils forming right at the top. It just always makes me salivate. That's good to go, still popping away. We're gonna put that to the side and we're gonna finish our broth. So now that you've got kind of like perfectly cooked garlic and onions there, that's just all flavor. We're gonna start adding all the various ingredients that I was talking about a while ago. So first, we have tinapa. You can use any type of tinapa you can get, and all we're gonna do is basically flake this. If you realize at this point, I haven't really added any seasoning as of yet because all the elements that we're adding now, tinapa, crab fat, all those things already kind of are salty, so you don't wanna overdo it. And you're gonna see really quickly, it's gonna kind of like dry up, but don't worry too much because we're gonna be adding that broth in there. Next, I have some crab fat. Just 1 heaped tablespoon. That's, hello cholesterol, how are you doing? That gets mixed in as well. So you've got this kind of like beautiful just mess of flavor. And then now we start extending that sauce by using our shrimp chicken hybrid broth. So at this point you can be like super gangster and cook this down for 2-3 hours until you get a really thick gravy-like consistency. But we're gonna be using some cornstarch and a cornstarch slurry, and I think most people actually use cornstarch slurries to thicken this sauce. But we're gonna let everything kind of simmer and get to know each other for about 10 to 15 minutes before we do that. Last little touch, hard-boiled eggs. Put that in a pot of boiling water. That's gonna go in. Honestly, like, I think this would be really good with like soft-boiled ramen-style eggs. I think we should try that next time. But here we're gonna go for about 7 minutes. Like, I don't want them to be too hard-boiled. I'm not a fan of like chalky hard-boiled. Right before adding the cornstarch slurry, this is when you actually taste it. That's where you kind of get the full flavor of it. It's good. Tinapa brought a little bit of saltiness to it, but I'm gonna add a tiny bit more with the fish sauce. A little bit of brown sugar. Should be better now. Much more flavorful, much richer. I'm gonna add a bit more taba talangka because why not? It always makes everything better. That goes in, gets melted in. That means my eggs are ready. So all you gotta do now is plunge your eggs into an ice bath. Again, I said we're going for something that's slightly undercooked than what you're usually used to. This is about 6:45, 7 minutes. That chills out. In that same water, this is where we're gonna be cooking our rice noodles. Fire's off, water's hot. That goes in for 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. What's really important here, because we're soaking it, is from time to time just move it around, and then when you're done, you can actually run it under some cold water and then strain it at the same time, kind of like one of these movements, and just make sure that it stays kind of apart and doesn't clump together. Set that aside. You'll see that our sauce here is starting to bubble nicely, so this is when we add our cornstarch slurry. So all you need is some water and some cornstarch. Just dissolve the cornstarch completely, and then we'll start adding that tablespoon by tablespoon, depending on how much we need. Very quickly, you'll be able to tell whether it's too much or not enough. That's why we'll always have our leftover broth as well. While waiting, we do all our toppings. So really simple. We have some chicharron. To that, we're gonna add some spring onions. That's gonna be accompanied by some calamansi, which I've already sliced over here. For extra crunch, totally not traditional, but I like adding some roasted peanuts. Kind of reminds me of like a pad thai. It's one of my favorite Thai dishes, so I think peanuts in this dish with these flavors make a lot of sense. Ah! This is what I do for everyone. I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. That's cooked. That's cooked. Okay, noodles are cooked. They go straight into an ice bath. So ideally, you kind of have warm-ish noodles and then a really piping hot sauce so that when you mix the sauce with the noodles, you get a nice hot dish. Set that aside for a couple minutes while I finish the toppings. Sauce is almost there. Now we cut our pork. I told you, it's a lot of elements, but it comes together really nicely. We have absolutely everything now, so we're gonna start with our noodles. So you wanna get them to a point where if you put them in a strainer like this and you do this, not much water comes out, or no water comes out rather, but they're still separated and not clumped up together. That's really key and important. This is gonna get a little messy because these are hard to take out because they're long strands. Now that's done, we have our nice thick sauce, and this is gonna go on top of the noodles. And then now this gets topped with all our toppings. So we've got our pork, got some peanuts, we have our shrimp. I'm gonna slice up our eggs, nice and kind of still a little runny and soft in the middle, which is exactly what I wanted. This gets topped with some spring onions, some calamansi, and then finally we're gonna finish up with some chicharron. And that's kind of like another fun way you can make palabok. Give this a try. Look at that. That looks absolutely perfect. That's so good. Like the intensity of the flavors you get from the chicken broth, to the shrimp heads, to the crab fat, to the tinapa, to the oil that we made with the garlic and aromatics. So perfect, so much texture, and just so many interesting things going on. But it's not overloaded in a sense that you don't taste everything. You taste everything individually, which I think is important. I honestly think Pancit Palabok could possibly be the best pancit. I'm not a fan of canton. I'm not a fan of like a pancit luglug or anything, but a palabok for me always hits home. What's your favorite pancit? Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time.